The sharp crack of leather against skin echoed through the small wooden house at the edge of Hollow Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878, as Willow Grant cowered against the wall, her arms raised protectively over her face. Blood trickled from her split lip, and her honey-blonde hair had come loose from its pins, falling around her shoulders in a disheveled curtain. "You think you can just run off whenever you please?" Thomas Grant's voice boomed through the house as he raised his belt again. At 45, he had grown bitter after Willow's mother died, drowning his sorrows in whiskey and taking out his anger on his only daughter. "After everything I've done for you, please, Father," Willow pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. At 19, she had endured years of his escalating abuse, but this time was different. She had tried to escape, to make it to her aunt's home in Colorado, but he'd caught her at the edge of town and dragged her back. "I just wanted what? To shame me? To abandon your duties?" He swung the belt again, and Willow flinched as it caught her shoulder. "You ungrateful little—" A thunderous pounding at the door interrupted him. Thomas Grant froze, belt still raised in the air. "Grant, open this door," a deep voice commanded from outside. Thomas hesitated, then dropped the belt and straightened his shirt. "Not a word," he hissed at Willow before moving to open the door. In the doorway stood Benjamin Gray, tall and imposing in his worn leather vest and dusty clothes. At 26, Ben was known throughout the territory as one of the most skilled horsemen and cattle drivers. His dark hair curled beneath his hat, and his normally gentle eyes were now hard as flint as they took in the scene before him. "I heard the commotion from the road," Ben said, his voice dangerously calm. "Thought I should check if everything was all right." "Everything's fine," Thomas replied stiffly. "Just a family matter. Nothing that concerns you, Gray." Ben's gaze shifted past Thomas to where Willow stood trembling, her face bruised and her lip bleeding. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a silent understanding that had been building over the months since Ben had started working at the neighboring ranch. "Miss Grant," Ben said, tipping his hat to her. "Are you all right?" Before Willow could answer, Thomas stepped between them. "I said it's a family matter. Now get off my property before you what?" Ben's hand moved subtly toward his holster. "Before you beat me like you beat your daughter?" Thomas's face reddened with rage. "How dare you, Willow?" Ben interrupted, his eyes never leaving her father's face. "Do you want to leave?" The room fell silent. In all her 19 years, no one had ever asked Willow what she wanted. She stared at Ben, at the determination in his eyes, at the promise of something she'd never dared to hope for. "Yes," she whispered, and the single word seemed to echo through the small house. Thomas lunged toward her. "You ungrateful!" Ben moved faster, stepping between them and shoving Thomas back with enough force to send him stumbling into the table. "Miss Grant," Ben said calmly, extending his hand to her, "I believe it's time we departed." Willow hesitated only for a moment before placing her trembling hand in his. Ben led her quickly outside to where his chestnut stallion waited. Behind them, Thomas Grant was bellowing threats, promising retribution. "Hold on," Ben said, helping Willow onto the horse before mounting behind her. She could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her back, his arms secure around her as he took the reins. As her father burst through the front door, red-faced and furious, Ben urged the horse forward. "You're free now," he whispered near her ear, and the words sank into Willow's heart like a promise as they galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust and her past behind. The sunset painted the Wyoming sky in hues of gold and crimson as they rode, Willow's heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. She had never been this close to a man before, especially not one like Benjamin Gray. His presence was both comforting and overwhelming. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice small against the rhythm of hoofbeats. "To the Wilcox Ranch for now," Ben replied. "Mrs. Wilcox will look after you while we figure things out." Your father won't dare come there not with Mr. Wilcox and his men around. The Wilcox Ranch was the largest in the territory, sprawling over thousands of acres. Ben had been working there for the past 2 years, earning a reputation as one of the most reliable hands. Willow had seen him in town occasionally, exchanging polite nods, but their conversations had been limited to brief pleasantries under her father's watchful eye. "He'll come looking for me," Willow said, her body tensing. "He always does." Ben's arms tightened slightly around her. Not this time. As they approached the ranch, the main house came into view, a grand 2-story structure with a wide porch and glowing windows. Mrs. Eleanor Wilcox, a formidable woman in her 50s, was already standing at the door as if she'd been expecting them. "Benjamin," she called as they approached, her sharp eyes taking in Willow's disheveled appearance. "I see we have a situation." Ben dismounted and helped Willow down, his hands gentle on her waist. She winced as her feet hit the ground, her body aching from her father's beating. "Mrs. Wilcox, this is Miss Willow Grant," Ben explained. "She needs a safe place to stay." Eleanor Wilcox's expression softened as she approached Willow. "Thomas Grant's daughter," she said, not a question but a statement. "I've heard stories about that man for years. Come inside, child. Let's get you cleaned up." Inside, the ranch house was warm and welcoming, so different from the cold, oppressive atmosphere of Willow's home. Mrs. Wilcox led her to a guest room upstairs while Ben waited in the parlor below. "Your father won't find you here," Mrs. Wilcox assured her as she helped Willow clean her wounds. "My husband has had his share of disagreements with Thomas Grant. He won't be welcome on our property." "I don't want to cause trouble," Willow said, tears welling in her eyes. "Nonsense. The only one causing trouble is that father of yours." Mrs. Wilcox's voice was firm but kind. "You can stay as long as you need to. We always need help around the house, and I imagine you're handy with a needle and thread?" Willow nodded. Sewing was one of the few pleasures her father had allowed her. "Good. Then it's settled. You'll stay here and help me, and in return, you'll have a safe place to sleep and good food to eat." Mrs. Wilcox patted her hand. "Now rest. We'll talk more in the morning." When Mrs. Wilcox left, Willow sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. The room was simple but comfortable, with a real feather mattress and clean linens, luxuries she wasn't accustomed to. A soft knock on the door startled her. "Miss Grant? It's Ben. May I speak with you for a moment?" "Yes," she called, hastily smoothing her hair. Ben entered, hat in hand, looking somewhat awkward in the domestic setting. "I wanted to make sure you were settling in all right." "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Wilcox has been very kind." Willow studied him in the lamplight. There was something about Benjamin Gray that made her feel safe. Perhaps it was his quiet confidence or the gentle way he looked at her, as if she mattered. "Why did you help me?" Ben's expression grew serious. "I've seen what your father does. The bruises you try to hide when you come to town. I should have done something sooner." He took a step closer. "No one deserves to live in fear, Miss Grant." "Willow," she corrected him softly. "Please call me Willow." A small smile touched his lips. "Willow, then." He cleared his throat. "I'll be staying in the bunkhouse with the other hands. If you need anything, just ask for me." As he turned to leave, Willow called out, "Mr. Gray?" He paused, looking back at her.
"Ben," he said.
"If I'm to call you Willow, you should call me Ben." "Ben," she repeated, the name feeling right on her lips. "Thank you. For everything." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "Get some rest, Willow. You're safe now." After he left, Willow lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she felt something like hope blossoming in her chest. Outside, the vast Wyoming sky was filled with stars, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate wild and free. The next morning, Willow woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, expecting to hear her father's harsh voice demanding she prepare his breakfast. Instead, there was only the distant sound of ranch hands calling to each other and the gentle clatter of dishes from downstairs. Willow dressed quickly in the same clothes from yesterday, wishing she had thought to bring more with her when she ran. In the kitchen, Mrs. Wilcox was overseeing the preparation of breakfast for the ranch hands. She smiled when she saw Willow. "Good morning, dear. Sleep well." "Yes, thank you," Willow replied, though in truth, her sleep had been fitful, filled with dreams of her father finding her. "I've set aside some of my daughter's old clothes for you," Mrs. Wilcox said, gesturing to a neatly folded stack on a chair. "She's married and living in Denver now. They should fit you well enough until we can get to town for fabric." Overwhelmed by the kindness, Willow could only nod her thanks. "Now have some breakfast, and then you can help me with the mending. The men are always tearing something or other." Mrs. Wilcox handed her a plate piled with eggs, bacon, and biscuits, more food than her father had ever allowed her at one sitting. As Willow ate, the ranch hands began filing in for their breakfast. Some nodded politely to her, while others pretended not to notice the stranger in their midst. Ben was one of the last to enter, his hair damp from washing and his shirt clean. Their eyes met across the room, and he gave her a small smile that sent an unexpected warmth through her. Later that morning, as Willow sat on the porch mending shirts, Ben approached, leading a beautiful bay mare. "Mrs. Wilcox mentioned you might like to see the ranch," he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. "If you're feeling up to it, that is." Willow hesitated, setting aside her mending. "I don't know how to ride," she admitted. Her father had never allowed it, claiming it wasn't proper for a young lady. Ben's smile widened. "Then it's high time you learned. This is Daisy. She's gentle as they come, perfect for beginners." Under Ben's patient guidance, Willow found herself atop the mare, her initial fear giving way to excitement as they set off at a slow walk. Ben led them away from the main ranch buildings, out toward rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers. "Keep your back straight and your heels down," he instructed, walking alongside. "That's it. You're a natural." Willow couldn't help but laugh, a sound so foreign to her own ears that it startled her. "I doubt that very much, but thank you for the encouragement." As the morning progressed, Willow grew more comfortable in the saddle. Ben showed her how to guide Daisy with the reins in her knees, and soon they were riding side by side, Ben on his chestnut stallion. "This land is beautiful," Willow said, taking in the vast expanse of the Wyoming territory. In the distance, the mountains rose majestic against the sky. "It is," Ben agreed. "Sometimes I ride out here just to look at it. Makes a man feel small and big at the same time, if that makes any sense." "It does," Willow replied softly. "Like you're part of something greater than yourself." Ben glanced at her with surprise and something like appreciation. "Exactly." They stopped by a small creek to let the horses drink. Ben helped Willow dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The bruise on her cheekbone had darkened overnight, and she saw his eyes harden as he looked at it. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For not doing something sooner. I knew what was happening. Everyone in town did, but no one wanted to interfere in family matters." His jaw clenched. "It wasn't right." Willow touched his arm gently. "You did something now. That's what matters." They stood there by the creek, the horses drinking quietly, a comfortable silence between them. For Willow, who had known so little kindness in her life, the simple act of being treated with respect by this man was overwhelming. "Tell me about yourself," she said finally. "How did you come to work for the Wilcoxes?" Ben sat on a fallen log, inviting her to join him. "I grew up in Missouri. My pa had a small farm, but it wasn't enough to support all of us. I have 4 younger sisters. When I was 18, I headed west, worked cattle drives, did some scouting for the army." He shrugged. Found my way here 2 years ago. Mr. Wilcox needed good hands, and I needed steady work. And your family? Do you see them? Not often enough. I send money home when I can. His expression grew distant. Pa died last winter. Pneumonia. My sisters are with my aunt now. I'm sorry, Willow said, genuinely feeling his loss. Ben nodded his thanks. What about you? Besides. He gestured vaguely, not wanting to mention her father directly. There's not much to tell, Willow admitted. My mother died when I was 12. Consumption. After that, father changed. He was always strict, but then he became. She trailed off, unable to find the words. Cruel, Ben finished for her, his voice gentle. Yes. Willow looked down at her hands. I tried to run away once before when I was 16. He found me before I even made it out of town. That was the first time he used his belt instead of just his hand. Ben's expression darkened, but he kept his voice calm. And yesterday? What made you try again? Willow hesitated, then decided that Ben deserved the truth after everything he'd done for her. He arranged a marriage for me. To Harold Blackwell, the widower who owns the saloon in town. Blackwell. Ben's disgust was evident. The man's nearly 50, and mean as a rattlesnake when he drinks, which is most of the time. Yes. The wedding was to be next week. Father said it was a good match. Blackwell has money, and he was willing to take me. Willow's voice broke. I couldn't bear it. So I ran. Without warning, Ben reached out and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from rope and reins, but his touch was gentle. You won't have to go back. Not to your father, and not to Blackwell. But what can I do? Where can I go? I have no money, no skills except keeping house. You have time to figure that out, Ben assured her. Mrs. Wilcox already seems to have taken a shine to you, and she's been saying for months that she needs help around the house. Stay here, at least for now. The simple kindness of his words, the warmth of his hand around hers, the quiet strength of his presence, it all combined to make Willow feel something she hadn't experienced in years. Safety. As they rode back to the ranch, side by side under the vast Wyoming sky, Willow realized that for the first time in her life, she was facing a future full of possibilities rather than dread. The days at Wilcox Ranch fell into a comfortable rhythm. Willow helped Mrs. Wilcox with household tasks during the day and spent her evenings learning to read better from the books in Mr. Wilcox's study. Her father had never encouraged education for women, believing it filled their heads with dangerous ideas, but the Wilcoxes were different. They treated her not as a servant, but almost as family. And then there was Ben. Despite his duties around the ranch, he always found time to seek her out, bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted on the range, teaching her more about writing, or simply sitting with her on the porch after supper, talking about everything and nothing. 2 weeks after her arrival, as Willow was hanging laundry in the yard, she spotted a familiar figure riding up the long driveway to the ranch. Her heart froze in her chest as she recognized her father's stocky silhouette. Mrs. Wilcox was at her side in an instant. Go inside, dear, she said firmly. Robert will handle this. But Willow stood rooted to the spot, fear and defiance warring within her as her father approached. Mr. Wilcox and several ranch hands, including Ben, came out to meet him. Grant, Mr. Wilcox called, his voice carrying across the yard. You're not welcome here. Thomas Grant reined in his horse, his gaze finding Willow immediately. I've come for my daughter, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. This is a family matter, Wilcox. Don't interfere. The girl is under my protection now, Mr. Wilcox replied evenly. There have been rumors about how you treat her for years. I'm inclined to believe them, looking at the state she was in when she arrived. She's my daughter, Thomas spat. I have the right. You lost that right when you raised your hand to her, Ben interrupted, stepping forward. Willow had never seen him look so dangerous, his hand resting casually near his holster. Thomas's eyes narrowed. So that's how it is. You think you can steal my daughter, Gray? She's promised to Harold Blackwell. The wedding's in 5 days. She's not going with you, Ben said, his voice deadly calm. And she's certainly not marrying Blackwell. Thomas dismounted, his face red with anger. You've got no say in this, Cowboy. She's coming home where she belongs. Gathering her courage, Willow stepped forward. No, Father. I'm not. The yard fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Willow felt herself trembling but forced herself to continue. I'm staying here. I'm not a child anymore. You can't force me to marry a man I don't love, and you can't hurt me anymore. Thomas's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. He lunged toward her, but before he could take 2 steps, Ben was between them, one hand on Thomas's chest, the other hovering near his gun. Take 1 more step, and it'll be your last, Ben warned, his voice low. Mr. Wilcox moved to stand beside them. You heard the lady, Grant. She's staying. Now, I suggest you get back on your horse and ride out of here before things get unpleasant. For a tense moment, it seemed Thomas might try to fight his way through, but surrounded by determined ranch hands, he thought better of it. This isn't over, he snarled, pointing at Willow. You'll regret this, girl. As he mounted his horse, his parting shot was directed at Ben. Enjoy my leavings, Gray. She's damaged goods anyway. Ben's hand twitched toward his gun, but Mr. Wilcox placed a restraining hand on his arm. Thomas Grant spurred his horse and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The tension in the yard dissipated slowly. The ranch hands returned to their work, and Mr. Wilcox nodded to Ben before heading back to the barn. Mrs. Wilcox gave Willow's shoulder a comforting squeeze before discreetly returning to the house. Alone in the yard, Willow found herself unable to stop shaking. Ben approached her cautiously, as if afraid she might break. Are you all right? He asked softly. The concern in his voice undid her completely. Tears she had been holding back for years suddenly spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. Without hesitation, Ben stepped forward and gathered her in his arms. He held her gently, one hand stroking her hair as she cried against his chest. It's okay, he murmured. You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore. When her tears finally subsided, Willow became acutely aware of their closeness, of the steady beat of Ben's heart under her ear, of his arms around her, of the scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him. I'm sorry, she whispered, embarrassed by her breakdown. Don't be, Ben replied, his voice a low rumble she could feel as much as hear. You were braver than anyone I've ever seen, standing up to him like that. Willow pulled back slightly to look up at him. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. That's what makes it brave, Ben said, reaching up to gently wipe a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Doing something even though you're scared. The tenderness in his touch, in his eyes, made Willow's heart beat faster. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and she realized with a startling clarity that she wanted him to. Instead, Ben took a small step back, though his hands remained lightly on her shoulders. Your father won't give up easily, he warned. And Blackwell will be angry too. We need to be careful. What should we do? Willow asked, already missing the warmth of his embrace. For now, don't go into town alone. Stay close to the ranch. Ben's expression was serious. I won't let them hurt you, Willow. I promise. The conviction in his voice made her believe him completely. As they walked back toward the house, Willow felt something shift between them, something profound and unspoken that filled her with both excitement and trepidation. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Willow sat by her window, looking out at the starlit ranch. Below, she could see a figure walking slowly near the corral. Ben, unable to sleep, his lantern casting a small circle of light in the darkness. Without allowing herself to think too much about what she was doing, Willow wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and slipped downstairs and out into the night. Ben turned at the sound of her approach, surprise evident on his face. "Willow, is everything all right?" "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, drawing her shawl tighter around herself in the cool night air. "I saw you from my window." Ben's expression softened. "Thought I'd check on the new foal," he explained, nodding toward the corral where a mare stood protectively over her sleeping foal. "Born just yesterday." Willow moved closer to the fence, enchanted by the sight of the gangly newborn. "He's beautiful." Ben corrected with a smile. "A little filly. Strong too. She was up and nursing within an hour of being born." They stood in companionable silence, watching the mare and foal. The night was alive with sounds: crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, the soft shuffling of horses in the corral. "I never thanked you properly," Willow said finally. "For saving me that day. For everything since." Ben shook his head. "You don't need to thank me for doing what any decent man would do." "But that's just it," Willow insisted, turning to face him fully. "Not every man would have done what you did." "My father is not a decent man," Ben finished for her. In the lantern light, his features were cast in gold and shadow, making him look almost like a figure from a painting. "No, he's not," Willow agreed. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind for days. "Why did you help me, Ben? Really?" Ben was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon rather than on her. "I recognized something in you," he said finally. "A kind of quiet strength. Even with everything your father did to you, you never let him break your spirit. I saw it in your eyes whenever I passed you in town." He turned to look at her then, his gaze intense. "And I couldn't bear the thought of that spirit being crushed." His words touched something deep within Willow, a part of herself she had almost forgotten existed. "I don't feel very strong," she confessed. "You are," Ben assured her. "Stronger than you know." Without thinking, Willow reached out and placed her hand on his arm. "Thank you for seeing that in me. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Ben looked down at her hand, then back up to her face. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words and feelings. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. When they separated, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first day you arrived," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Willow's heart was racing, her lips tingling from the kiss. "I've wanted you to," she whispered back. The night wrapped around them like a blanket as they stood there, suspended in a moment that seemed both entirely new and somehow inevitable. For Willow, who had known so little tenderness in her life, the simple act of being held by a man who treated her with respect and genuine affection was revolutionary. Later, as Ben walked her back to the house, their fingers intertwined, Willow felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Not just for safety or survival, but for happiness, for a future filled with love rather than fear. At the porch steps, Ben kissed her once more, a promise in the dark before watching her slip quietly back inside. Upstairs in her room, Willow touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Outside, the vast Wyoming sky was filled with stars, and for the first time in her life, Willow Grant felt truly free. The next few days passed in a state of heightened awareness for Willow. Every glance from Ben across the dining table, every brush of his hand against hers when they passed each other in the yard, sent shivers of excitement through her. They found moments to be alone, brief conversations in the garden, stolen kisses in the shadow of the barn, but always mindful of propriety and the watchful eyes of the ranch. Mrs. Wilcox, perceptive as always, noticed the change between them but said nothing directly. Instead, she began including Willow in conversations about the ranch's future, teaching her not just household management, but also the business side of ranching. A woman should always be able to stand on her own 2 feet, she told Willow one afternoon as they reviewed the accounts. Love is a wonderful thing, but it's not a substitute for knowing your own worth. 5 days after her father's visit, Mr. Wilcox returned from town with troubling news. Blackwell's been asking questions about you, he told Willow at supper. Sounds like he's not taking kindly to losing his bride-to-be. Ben's expression darkened. What kind of questions? Wanted to know if anyone had seen you, where you might be staying. Mr. Wilcox's voice was grave. I don't like it. The man's got a nasty reputation when he's cross. He won't find her here, Ben said firmly. But later that night, as they walked together near the creek where they'd first begun to know each other, Ben's concern was evident. Maybe you should go stay with Mrs. Wilcox's sister in Cheyenne for a while, he suggested. Just until things settle down. Willow stopped walking to look at him directly. Are you trying to send me away?
No.
God, no. Ben ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm trying to keep you safe. Blackwell is dangerous, Willow. And if he and your father join forces. I won't run anymore, Willow said, surprised by the determination in her own voice. I've spent my whole life being afraid. I won't live that way anymore. Ben studied her face in the moonlight, pride and worry warring in his expression. You really are the strongest woman I've ever known, he said finally, pulling her into his arms. Willow melted against him, still marveling at how right it felt to be held by him. We'll face whatever comes together, she murmured against his chest. Ben's arms tightened around her. Together, he agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The following Sunday, Willow accompanied the Wilcoxes to church in town. It was her first time back since her escape, and despite her new resolve to stop running, she felt a flutter of anxiety as they approached the small white chapel. Ben rode alongside the wagon, his presence a comforting shield. Remember, he said quietly as he helped her down, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Hold your head high. Inside the church, Willow was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed her. Some were sympathetic, others judgmental. Her father was noticeably absent, but halfway through the service, Harold Blackwell entered, his cold eyes finding her immediately. Willow forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, even as her heart pounded in her chest. Beside her, Ben shifted subtly closer, his shoulder touching hers in silent support. After the service, as they made their way out of the church, Blackwell intercepted them. Miss Grant, he said, his voice deceptively pleasant. I've been concerned about your whereabouts. Your father is quite distressed. Mr. Blackwell. Willow acknowledged him with a slight nod, proud that her voice remained steady. As you can see, I'm perfectly well. Indeed. His eyes flicked to Ben, then back to her. I had hoped we might speak privately about our arrangement. There is no arrangement, Ben interjected before Willow could respond. Miss Grant will not be marrying you, now or ever. Blackwell's false pleasantness vanished. This doesn't concern you, Gray. The girl's father and I have an understanding. The girl is standing right here, Willow said, finding her voice. And I make my own decisions about whom I marry. A crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Blackwell seemed to notice, moderating his tone. Your father assured me you would come around to the idea, given time. My father was wrong, Willow replied simply. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. Thomas and I have been discussing options for bringing you back to your senses. The implied threat hung in the air. Ben took a step forward, but Mr. Wilcox placed a restraining hand on his arm. I believe this conversation is over, Blackwell, Mr. Wilcox said firmly. Miss Grant is under our protection now. As they turned to leave, Blackwell called after them. This isn't finished. The ride back to the ranch was tense. Willow could see the muscle working in Ben's jaw as he rode beside the wagon, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. That evening, Mr. Wilcox doubled the watch around the ranch, concerned that Blackwell might try something desperate. Ben insisted on staying near the house rather than returning to the bunkhouse, sleeping on a pallet in the kitchen despite Mrs. Wilcox's protests about propriety. Better a scandal than a tragedy, he'd said grimly. In the dark hours before dawn, Willow was awakened by the smell of smoke. She sat up in bed, momentarily disoriented, before realizing with horror that the acrid scent was growing stronger. Grabbing her shawl, she rushed into the hallway to find Mrs. Wilcox already there, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. "Fire!" Mr. Wilcox's voice boomed from downstairs. "Everyone out now." Willow helped Mrs. Wilcox down the stairs, their path illuminated by the ominous orange glow coming from the kitchen. At the bottom of the stairs stood Ben, his face smudged with soot. "This way," he urged, leading them toward the front door. "The back of the house is already engulfed." Outside, the night was chaos. Ranch hands ran with buckets of water from the well, trying to contain the blaze that had already consumed the back portion of the house. The flames reached toward the sky, casting everything in a hellish light. "Is everyone out?" Ben asked Mr. Wilcox, who was organizing the bucket line. "All accounted for," the older man confirmed. "But we're losing the house." A gunshot cracked through the night, sending everyone diving for cover. From the shadows beyond the burning house emerged two figures, Harold Blackwell and Thomas Grant, both armed. "Told you this wasn't finished," Blackwell called, his face twisted with malice in the firelight. Ben pushed Willow behind him, drawing his own gun. "You've gone too far, Blackwell. The sheriff will hang you for arson." "Only if someone lives to tell him about it," Thomas Grant replied coldly, raising his rifle. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As Thomas took aim, Ben dove forward, pushing Mr. Wilcox out of the line of fire. The rifle cracked, and Ben stumbled, clutching his shoulder. Willow screamed, running to Ben's side as he fell to one knee. Blood seeped between his fingers where he pressed them against his wound. "I'm all right," he gasped, though his face was pale with pain. "Just grazed me." Several ranch hands had drawn their weapons, creating a standoff. Mr. Wilcox's voice cut through the tension. "Lower your weapons or my men will fire." For a moment, it seemed Blackwell and Grant might press their advantage, but the odds were against them. With a curse, Blackwell lowered his gun, and after a moment's hesitation, Thomas did the same. "This is over," Mr. Wilcox said firmly. "Two of you, ride to town for the sheriff. The rest, keep these men covered." As the ranch hands moved to secure Blackwell and Grant, Willow helped Ben to a bench away from the burning house. Mrs. Wilcox brought clean cloths and water to tend his wound. "It's not deep," she assured Willow after examining Ben's shoulder. "The bullet just grazed him. He'll be sore, but he'll heal." Relief washed over Willow. She took Ben's hand in hers, holding it tightly as Mrs. Wilcox cleaned and bandaged the wound. Across the yard, her father watched with cold eyes, his hands now bound behind his back. By morning, the sheriff had arrived with his deputies. The fire had been contained, though the kitchen and back rooms of the house were destroyed. As the sheriff questioned everyone about the night's events, it became clear that Blackwell and Grant had plotted to burn the ranch and take Willow in the confusion. "They'll be facing serious charges," the sheriff told Mr. Wilcox. "Arson, attempted murder, kidnapping. They won't be troubling you again for a long while." As the sheriff's wagon departed with the prisoners, Willow stood with Ben, watching her father being taken away. There was a finality to it that brought both sadness and relief. "Are you all right?" Ben asked gently, his uninjured arm around her shoulders. Willow considered the question carefully. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I am." In the days that followed, the ranch community came together to rebuild the damaged portions of the Wilcox house. Neighbors brought food and supplies, and everyone worked from sunrise to sunset, clearing debris and raising new walls. Ben, despite his injury, insisted on helping as much as he could. Willow found herself working alongside him, learning to hammer nails and saw boards. There was something deeply satisfying about rebuilding, about creating something new from the ashes of destruction. One evening, as the sun set over the newly framed kitchen wall, Ben found Willow alone, admiring their day's work. "It's going to be better than before," she observed. "Stronger." "Yes," Ben agreed, moving to stand beside her. He was healing well, though he still favored his right arm. Sometimes that's how it works. The things that try to break us end up making us stronger in the end. Willow turned to face him, struck by the truth of his words. "Is that what happened to us?" Ben's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I think so. But I also think we were always strong, we just needed the right circumstances to see it in ourselves." He took her hand then, his expression growing serious. "Willow, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart began to race as he dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hand in his. "I know it hasn't been long," he said, his voice low and earnest, "but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Willow Grant. I love your courage, your kindness, your resilience. I want to build a life with you, one where you never have to be afraid again." Tears blurred Willow's vision as Ben continued. "I don't have much to offer yet, but Mr. Wilcox has offered me the foreman position, and I've been saving for a piece of land just north of here. It's beautiful, has a creek running through it just like the one where we first really talked." He squeezed her hand gently. "Willow, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, not needing to think about her answer. "Yes, Ben, I will." As he rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, Willow felt the final pieces of her old life falling away. The kiss they shared was a promise of love, of partnership, of a future built on respect and tenderness rather than fear and control. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Willow Grant became Willow Gray in a simple ceremony at the rebuilt Wilcox Ranch. She wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Wilcox had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. As Ben slipped a gold band onto her finger, his eyes never leaving hers, Willow remembered that day by the creek when he had first told her she was strong. She hadn't believed him then, but now she knew it was true. She had survived, had found her voice, had learned to trust and to love. Standing beside the man who had lifted her onto his horse and promised her freedom, Willow realized that she had found something even more precious than freedom. She had found home. 5 years later, as the sun set over their own ranch, Willow stood on the porch watching Ben play with their 3-year-old daughter. Little Eleanor, named for Mrs. Wilcox, who had become like a mother to Willow, shrieked with delight as her father swung her high in the air. Inside, their infant son slept peacefully in his cradle, a perfect blend of his parents with Ben's dark hair and Willow's clear green eyes. The home they had built together was modest, but filled with warmth and laughter, everything Willow had once thought beyond her reach. As Ben approached the porch with their daughter on his shoulders, his smile as bright as the day she had first truly seen it, Willow felt a contentment so deep it seemed to radiate from her very soul. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" Ben asked, setting Eleanor down to run inside for her doll. Willow stepped into his waiting arms, resting her head against his chest to hear the steady heartbeat that had become the rhythm of her life. "I was thinking about the day you found me," she said softly, "about how scared I was, and how I never imagined I could be this happy." Ben's arms tightened around her. "That day changed everything for me too," he admitted. "I set out to rescue you, but in the end, you saved me just as much." As the stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Ben and Willow Gray stood together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the life they had created, free, strong, and deeply in love.